Thank you for joining me today at A Touch of Blue Studio with Drawing with Grandma. Welcome back. Today we're going to continue in our sketchbook studies with this drawing board that we had done a few weeks ago. And we're going to do a study that relates to these squirrels, but we're going to do a little chipmunk. So here we are. I have the placement marks there, and it reveals a large oval for the body, for the chest, and for the head. And those are linked together, overlap to create the anatomical structure of his little body. We're going to lay in the shoulder and these legs and place these paws as they grasp the rock. So there are two front paws there, and it leads us up to that little head, and we're going to build that head shape out of the oval that we established. So it's always helpful to do the placement marks before you begin the final lines and contour and structure of your drawing. And your placement marks can eventually be erased or covered over by your finished lines. I think I have his structure pretty accurate, so I'm going to place in the eye, and you can see that I found the nose and the eye and the base of that ear by following that line down. And if that's done correctly, then everything else should be a little simpler. I'm going to shade in some of the darkest areas, and I can gradually make any corrections needed as I go over the whole sketch and make sure that things are working together. So I'm going to start laying in some value, some tone, some pencil marks that help to communicate the fur and the way it's laying, and just to build his little body there. There's some stripes on him, and I'm going to establish the shapes of them, but I'll come back and I will work on the details and to make it a little bit more realistic. But right now I'm just kind of going over the whole drawing, laying in some foundational values, working on some of the edges, and establishing the dark and light variations and some interesting pencil techniques too. I also like to work on the blender to kind of smooth out and soften all of my lines, and then come back over with more finalized lines. One thing I really like about being a grandma is that through children's eyes you rediscover the mystery and fascination of animals and nature. And so it's a lot of fun to be able to draw animals and the things that children find fascinating. And it takes us back to the basics of just appreciating the beauty around us. These little claws are grasping the rock, and then we do see just a couple of claws from the back legs grasping the rock as well. And I'm not going to spend much time on the details of the rock, but I'm just going to suggest them and just show you how to shape and form his body. So we won't take this one too far. But I do want to build in those darkest values, and it helps with the contrast, make it more of an interesting piece. That tail has some definite pattern to it with dark and light lines. So I want to establish that. So here he is, just a fun little study of this little chipmunk to go on our finished illustration board. So we have a new sketchbook, and I've done this little sketch of these pears, and I just love to work on developing new sketches each day. And so this next page, we're going to begin a small study of a cougar. And you can see that I started with the circle of the head, and building out of that circle really helps to get the accurate shape first, instead of just trying to outline what you see. Try to find the dominant shapes within the whole image that you're studying. So I have the circle first, then I found the center line because this cat is looking directly at us. So it makes it a little easier actually than a side view or a 3/4 view. And so out of that center line, I find that cross section and that line across where the eyes are laying. The distance between the eyes is an important determination for a cat, to make sure that we have that accurate. I think that ear is a little bit big, a little bit tall. The shape needs to be a little bit wider and shorter. And then I build that chin and that muzzle right out of that circle. So the separation between those ears, the measurements need to be accurate. So I might make some little bit, I might make some changes as I go. Then I'm going to study the darkest areas first, or the nearly darkest areas, and get those placed in, because with animals, and especially animals that have patterns, we want to establish those because that actually helps us to draw accurately, to find the stripe on the top of his head, the framework around his eyes. This nose is actually a heart shape. It's kind of a unique element of cats. The muzzle will need to be widened a little bit. This chin brought down a little bit. But I'm trying to establish it gradually and correct it with tone as well as line. So if you use the side of the pencil, you're going to be able to erase more easily if necessary. If you use the point of the pencil, then you're going to put marks and pressed creases in your paper, and you want to avoid that. You want to keep the side of the pencil so that you can soften any strong lines that you've laid in, easily remove them if necessary. And so that's my technique, and I would recommend that you draw with the side of the pencil as much as possible. But here I want to get dark value and more precise areas, so I am using it upright now. The shape is very important about the eye, and that line leads us right down to the edge of the nose and around to the muzzle. So those things will help to establish the uniqueness of this animal, if those things are accurate. I think I need to emphasize this division right down the middle a little bit to help create more of a roundness to his head and to form the unique pattern. And to put some marks in that help to give the illusion of that fluffy fur. That would be in the front of his neck, her neck. Okay, we're just going to take it a little bit further. Just wanted you to see how we structure this drawing with a circle. You build out of the circle through lines and measurements to create the placement of the features. You build the ears out of the head, and you look for the unique qualities of that animal and make sure you accentuate them. You look for the light source in order to see where the shadows fall. And this one, there's not a lot of strong contrast between one side or the other, but we want to create some dark and light values for the effects of the hair, the texture, and the color. That if this was in color, you would see a lot of dark tones around that muzzle and the eye. So here we are now with some finishing touches, and I love to do the touches with a mechanical pencil to get some very fine lines and to clarify some edges. So thank you for joining me today at A Touch of Blue Studio with Drawing with Grandma on these 2 sketchbook studies.